Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. And I want to open this show today by thanking each and every one of you who answered the call to arms that I gave out on this show yesterday when I said, look, you can't trust the other network. That's very clear. You cannot trust ABC. You cannot trust CNN. You cannot trust MSNBC. We know that. We've known that. But another of the networks that we've put so much stock in recent years has really let us down. Really let us down. It's let the truth down. It's let the country down. It's let the Constitution down. It's let the president down. It's let its own viewership down over and over again. We saw what happened just a couple of months ago when the former speaker, Newt Gingrich, went on Fox News and talked about George Soros and why George Soros was important in this race. There are many reasons that George Soros is important in this race. And Newt Gingrich was shouted down and booted off of Fox News, raising the specter of a man who's not only bankrupted millions of people because of his own greed, my family included. As a young child, we were bankrupt. Lost our house, lost our cars, lost my dad's businesses. Because of George Soros' greed, when he shorted the pound, he wanted to make a quick £1 billion in the market. The older of you will remember it. The younger of you should look it up. 1992. Black Wednesday. Black Wednesday. George Soros is hyper-relevant to this race, and companies that George Soros is invested in are hyper-relevant to this race. DA races that George Soros funded are hyper-relevant to this race. Politicians that George Soros and his organizations and entities have donated to are hyper-relevant to this race. And George Soros is not Jewish. So spare me the anti-Semitic BS arguments to try and cover up for a man that is an enemy of the American Constitution and way of life. George Soros is an atheist. George Soros pumps money to anti-Israel causes. So don't give me the anti-Semitic nonsense. I've worked with the leading organizations in the world that tackle anti-Semitism all across the world. The Elie Wiesel Center, just more organizations that you could imagine. I will not hear it and I will not have it. George Soros is a legitimate target of scrutiny. But Fox News doesn't think he is. And the talking heads that people have placed so much trust in on Fox News for years and years and years. Did you see Sandra Smith's hot mic, hot camera moment? It wasn't so hot for her. When you have Cleta Mitchell, one of the best lawyers in the country, talking about why this race isn't over, and it isn't, you have the hot camera mic moment where Sandra Smith she's like this, she's looking down, doing this, she's listening to Cleta Mitchell say, this isn't over, she goes, we called it already, Trace, we called it. Why are you letting her talk like this? We called it. Guess what, Karen? You do not call the race for the presidency of the United States of America. That is not in your purview. That is not within your gift. And it never will be. Thank God. Thank God. That actually the Constitution of the United States doesn't defer to the media classes, doesn't defer even to the political elites. It defers to the people of the United States and the institutions that the people give credence, credibility, and consent to be governed by. And if the media wants to withdraw the consent from the people and hand it to themselves, then the media has a bigger problem than their ad revenues. They have a bigger problem than their hosts walking out, which I'm certain some will do. The media has a bigger problem on its hands if it wants to wage war against the American public. They have a rather large problem that my countrymen encountered once upon a time. And it's called the American public. Over the course of this show, we're going to be walking through more of how this steal is taking place, how this steal went down. If you are new to this show, welcome. This is where you get the news 3, 4, 5 months in advance, not because I'm here today, because of Natalie Winters here. She's doing the investigative reporting day in, day out. The Transition Integrity Project got that months in advance. They gave us their playbook. Everything and anything you can possibly imagine about the Chinese Communist Party and all of the lobbyists, the army of lobbyists that they employ here in Washington, D.C. Natalie Winters is on them. We told you in advance, and Phil Klein from the Amistad Project came on this show, and I believe we were one of the first shows to give Phil Klein an open forum to explain exactly what he was thinking in this regard. He came on this show months ago, and he explained exactly how the steal was going to work. Exactly how many tens, if not hundreds of millions, were being poured into very specific counties, Democrat-controlled counties, in order to encourage one certain vote to come out and discourage another from coming out. We're going to have Phil Klein back on this show, and Liz Harrington is the spokesman for the RNC, will be coming on, and we're going to ask, is this real? Is there really a path to victory here for President Trump? How does that look? What does it look like? How do we get there? How long is it going to take? There's a lot of questions to explore, but one thing's for certain. Joe Biden's not the president. Welcome back to the National Pulse. Now, yesterday we put out a call for people to become active members of the National Pulse website. We're not a paywall type deal, but what we do is try and ask people, ordinary people, for $5 or $10 a month to say, hey, look, real journalism isn't going to come from big corporate. They're not interested in doing it. All of the big corporate entities have let us down by hiring soy boys and Karens, and they're rubbing it in our faces every single day. So real reporting has to now come from the ground up again, and that's what we're doing over at the National Pulse. If you want to be somebody who contributes to that, doesn't have to be a lot. Some people give $500, some people give $5. Every little counts. So go to thenationalpulse.com/support, and we are incredibly grateful and humbled by the number of people. I think we have 1,000 people now who in some way are supporting the site. So we're incredibly grateful. I want to bring Phil Klein in now. Phil Klein of the Amistad Project over at the Thomas More Society, got-freedom.org. Phil, we had you on a couple of months ago, and I got to tell you, did you ever nail it? You came on here, you know, tinfoil hat on, hair on fire, screaming about Mark Zuckerberg and $300-odd million that were being dumped into counties across, and everybody who watched the show, all the establishment people who watched the show, contact me after and say, what is Phil talking about? Phil used to be a reputable guy. Why has he got his hair on fire now? What the heck's he talking about? Goodness me, Phil, weren't you ever proved correct? These counties all across the country that Mark Zuckerberg himself targeted with his group, they are the ones that we're now looking at in a serious way for all these kind of discrepancies, aberrations, anomalies. Phil, firstly, take a victory lap. Well done to you, my friend. You exposed the truth.
Well, thank you, and thank you and your show, because you blew the whistle. And it is unfortunate, and when you think about it, the networks that you were speaking of are the only people with big tech who have declared the winner of this presidency. The United States Constitution and the laws of this nation have not declared a winner. The ballots haven't been completely counted, and there is significant concern about the way they were counting. Now, Raheem, you look younger than I, but I remember very well gathering with people. It was 20 years ago. I imagine you were paying attention as well. When we watched the hanging chat, and we were in the counting room, and everybody in America had an opinion, and they had a right to, because they could see what was happening. The counting room is a place for America to be. That's how the ballots are counted. The ballot box is not a place for America to be, but the counting room is, because we need to see if our elections are completed right. And what's happened here, we've boarded up windows, we've kicked people out. The Democrats in many cities intentionally violated the law and kept Republicans out of the room. And at the same time, they've invited a billionaire in. I've got a question for Mr. Zuckerberg. Why don't you get the people you pay who have run these elections to open the door for the American people to see in? Why do you not release the flow of funds and the reasons for the decisions so that we can see how you bought election offices, how you dictated how they run elections, and that you provided funding for the actual pay? Why don't you release the communications between you and David Plouffe, Obama's former campaign manager, who worked for you and wrote the book predicting where these funds were going to flow to change the outcome of this election? What influence did he have on you to give these funds to CTCL? What influence did you give to CTCL on where these funds were given? You, sir, have operated like a shadow government. We don't believe in government being hidden from the voter. Release this information. Be transparent. Open the door so America can step in the counting room where you have paid officials keeping us out.
Phil, let me ask you a question here. What is the opportunity, likelihood for a lawsuit here, which would include a significant, I would imagine, amount of discovery in terms of what was going on behind the scenes?
We have got those lawsuits, and we are demanding this information. In fact, the evidence about how Mr. Zuckerberg is paying judges and officials in the counting room and those who collect the ballots and those who went out and harvest ballots, that it's his money through CTCL, was obtained by a court order out of Pennsylvania, because he's not being transparent. They're only showing what they want the American public to see, and they're hiding what is important. It's just like what we're seeing in the counting room. Look, Raheem, if you and I were playing poker and we were betting and I called you on your bet and you laid your cards on the table and I said, well, you know what? Here's my cards. I've won. Thank you, sir. You may leave now.
That's a very good analogy.
I agree with that. And that's what these Democrat officials and Mr. Zuckerberg have done in the urban cores that determined this election outcome. Trust us. We know who won.
Yeah.
We'll tell you.
Phil, that's a great analogy. Yeah, trust me, I've won. You don't need to see my cards. Phil, I know you're a really busy man right now, and I don't want to take you any further away from the incredible day-to-day work that you're doing. You have an open invite to come back at your convenience and at your behest. You're doing such important work here. Phil, I just want you to let the audience know, where can they find you, and more importantly, where can they support you in your work?
Thank you. Please go to got-freedom.org. Got, it's hyphen, GOT hyphen freedom.org. And we need your support. I don't have $400 million in my pocket.
Yeah. Phil, just before I let you go, I wanted to make sure we got that out first, but I got a couple of seconds here. Just before I let you go, is there any doubt in your mind, honestly, is there any doubt in your mind that we have been subject to a major fraud during this election?
I will say this is the most lawless election in my experience and my human life. And it's been also the most closed off election that we've ever seen, where the key counting is not available for the American public to watch. I'll end with this point. I've never investigated somebody who was guilty who wanted me to see the evidence in their pocket. And I've never investigated somebody who was innocent who didn't want me to see the evidence they control, which proves their innocence. What are they hiding?
Yeah. Phil Klein, we'll speak to you again soon. Godspeed, my friend. We'll be back with more National Pulse. I want to make sure that all of you are going to thenationalpulse.com. If you are just hearing about this news, if you're just hearing about CTCL, if you're just hearing about the Zuckerberg stuff, we covered it. Thanks to the hard work of Phil Klein over at thenationalpulse.com. Head over there now. Welcome back. This is the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam. I edit the website, thenationalpulse.com, but the person who does the real work isn't here, so we've got Natalie Winters instead. Natalie, welcome back to the show. Grateful for having you, etc., etc. Familiarity. Let's talk about Dominion, because there's a lot of talk out there about what went wrong during this election, what intentionally went wrong, what accidentally went wrong, what's in the middle so far. And Dominion seems like this word that keeps coming up. Now, a lot of people will turn their backs on news like this and information like this because they go, oh, you're Alex Jones, you got a tinfoil hat on, you're saying everything's rigged, the frogs are turning gay, whatever it is. Not that Alex Jones has actually been wrong about all that many things, but there's a certain way that the establishment rejects information like this, right? They say it's conspiracy theory. Is Dominion real? Does it exist?
Yes.
Okay. So something called Dominion exists. What is it?
So Dominion Voting System is a firm that operates in around 20 states. This election, it's really being focused on how it operates in swing states like Michigan, like Georgia. It also operates in Pennsylvania, Arizona, a host of other states, as I said. But what's interesting is that Texas, specifically...
Slow down. So Dominion exists.
It exists.
It's a voting system that's used in several states, maybe a score of states, right? And it's actually been trialed prior to this election, been used prior to this election, but went through kind of a rigorous testing process by the state of Texas.
Yes.
When was that?
Just to add one thing, it also has been used outside of the United States. Now, putting our conspiracy theory hats on.
Where did it work? Iraq?
Well, interestingly enough, the firm donated anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 to the Clinton Foundation, Washington Post records show. Of
course they did.
Exactly. And interestingly enough, they used it to run elections in actually rather prescient. I'll read the quote.
Yeah.
In 2014, from the Clinton Foundation blog, Dominion Voting Systems committed to providing emerging and post-conflict democracies with access to voting technology support to the Delian Project, as many emerging democracies suffer from post-electoral violence due to the delay in the publishing of election results.
Oh, funny. So it doesn't say where necessarily, it just says...
Then it was also
post.
used in the Philippines.
Yeah. So post, what is it? Post-conflict?
Post-conflict.
Right. So, but in this case, in America's case, it's pre-conflict. So let's go through. So Texas did its testing.
So Texas vetted the system. They had a PhD designated by the Attorney General go in, do a mock implementation of the voting system, which was a 184-step process that even from the onset they flagged as unnecessarily rigorous, complex, and I believe error-prone was the direct quote. And they conducted 2 of these evaluations, of they being Texas Secretary of State, conducted 2 investigations of Dominion voting systems, once in 2013, the most recent one in 2019 on November 3rd, actually. And both times the conclusion were that the system should not be adopted for a host of reasons, which the article we have up at the site really dives into. But as I said, whether it was the fact that it was confusing to voters and that it would tell people that you had voted, but in reality it was just printing a ballot where you still had to go and drop the ballot off somewhere, or the fact...
Wait, slow down. You need to walk, because listen, put yourself in the position of a person at home who may be tuning into the show for the first time. You just dropped a bombshell right there. This system was found to be telling people that had voted when in reality it was printing off a slip that they needed to deposit somewhere else.
Exactly. There are some difficulties with the language. If you read the report, again, it's only 5 pages, but it's pretty comprehensive. Maybe to preface it, I'll read the individual's takeaway, and that is that, quote, computer systems should be designed to prevent or detect human error whenever possible and minimize the consequences of both human mistakes and equipment failure. Instead, the Democracy Suite 55A, which is Dominion Voting Systems product, is, quote, fragile and error-prone. In my opinion, it should not be certified for use in Texas. For instance, one of the other flags that this report raises, quote, during our voting test, we discovered that some party names and proposition text were not displayed, and one scanner was not accepting some ballots. The report continues.
Hang on. Okay, so the concerns page, right, is the most interesting part of this report.
Yes.
On page 3. So concern. Installation is complex, error-prone, and tedious. Recommendation: certification should be denied. Test voting. During our voting test, we discovered some party names and proposition text were not displayed in one scanner and was not accepting some ballots. Recommendation: certification should be denied. Misleading message. The ballot marking devices incorrectly informed voters that they were casting ballots when in fact they were only printing them. Recommendation: certification should be denied. Disappearing message. At one point, while scanning ballots, something flashed on the display so briefly that we could not read it. After several attempts to rescan the ballot, we were able to discern that it was a message reading ambiguous mark that was displayed for a second or less. It then reverts to a system-ready message. The voter has no way of knowing if anything is wrong, since the error message does not persist long enough to read it. Recommendation: certification should be denied. USB port vulnerability. The ICX ballot marking device has an indicator light on top to show poll workers when the station is in use. That light is connected via a USB port. When the phone was attached to the USB port, the machine scanned the files on his phone and did not complain, although Dominion later showed that the event was logged. When a USB drive with files was inserted, the machine sometimes complained and sometimes did not, apparently according to the content of the USB device, and whether it was present when the machine was first powered up or inserted later. Recommendation: certification should be denied unless either the indicator light is removed or a way is found to secure the USB connection. Effectively, what they're saying is not that this whole system is incredibly faulty, but it's also open to tampering with. They're basically telling us that you can go and put a USB stick in. And again, remember on the show yesterday, I think it was on the show yesterday, I said, hey, you give me 4 years and $1 billion and I could rig the election, right? You give me 4 minutes and a USB stick and I could rig this machine.
The intro to the report also talks about how a lot of the components, and even in some cases the voting machines themselves, are available for sale on eBay and a host of other resale platforms. So if you wanted to hack the election, the fact that Dominion voting systems are available makes it incredibly more likely.
And it's used in 20 states.
Yes.
The world's most thriving democracy, ladies and gentlemen. At least that's what they'd have you believe it is. It's a republic. And the question is, can we keep it? We'll be back. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Swiftly becoming one of the most banned websites in America, by the way. I appealed this morning. If you're interested, I appealed. I put my official appeal in to Twitter to get our 70,000 strong Twitter page back. I haven't heard anything back from Twitter yet. It's been quite a long time already, nearly 12 hours already. We'll see if they ever respond. In the meantime, I want to make sure that you're following us. If you can go to thenationalpulse.com, you will see that you can sign up to a newsletter, for instance. You can sign up for browser notifications when an article comes out, and you won't get a lot of those from us. We only publish 3 to 4 articles a day, only doing the signal, not the noise. And I want to make sure that you're following us on Parler. Look for the National Pulse. We'll be back, supposedly, on Facebook in, 30 days? I think it's
December 7th.
December 7th, so it's 30 days in total. So we'll do a countdown. We'll get a countdown up. It's 27 days away until you can get us back on Facebook again. We got a Telegram channel that we're in the midst of setting up right now. Lots of other ways, basically, to interact with this. I do want to say one thing before I go to our next guest. Thank you, Jack Dorsey. And thank you, Madeline Pelt and Media Matters, for getting us kicked off these platforms. Thank you, Nandini, whatever your name is, from Sleeping Giants, for trying to take away our advertising revenue stream. In the last 24 hours, we've had a slew of patriots going to thenationalpulse.com/support and signing up, and they get all sorts of things in return, but signing up and supporting our journalism, supporting our website, because as a direct result of you harassing us. I've had an explosion on my Twitter page. I've had just an incredible. I mean, we've got 4 times the traffic to the homepage right now that we ever have at a given time. So thank you to the censorious Big Brother left. The Streisand effect is in full effect. And speaking of somebody who's getting astronomical numbers on social media right now, I want to bring in the Republican National Committee's spokeswoman, Elizabeth Harrington. Now, I will declare before we speak, Liz, because I hate, and you can hear, I'm already calling you Liz, I hate when people have their buddies on their shows and don't declare that they are friends. And for the audience out there, I want you to know that Liz and I have known each other for a long time. I regard us as friends. Liz probably doesn't. She's too wise to admit to something like that. But also, I think I have to declare one more thing, Liz, is that Liz makes the meanest buffalo chicken dip I've ever had.
I actually made it last weekend, and it was very good.
Wow. Thanks for the invite. Must have got lost in the mail.
4 ingredients.
All right, Liz, where are we with all of this? Because, I keep getting told, I'm getting inundated by the Lincoln Project people on my Twitter. They're saying you're chasing things down a dead end here. There's no case to be made. There are no affidavits. You're absolutely lying. Everybody could observe every election count all across the country. There are no problems. Sarah Silverman tweeted about an hour ago, hey, this system has served us right for the last 200 years. Incredible, right? Hollywood running to the rescue of ancient institutions now. This system has been fine for the last 200 years. No problems, never a hiccup. So Liz, are you a conspiracy theorist? Am I a conspiracy theorist? Is this real?
Well, that's what they're calling all of us. And like you were talking about the censorship, that gives you a good idea that you're right on target. I mean, it's the same thing that they did with the Hunter Biden laptop, if you recall. Oh, the same man who is literally beholden to the Chinese Communist Party with the shady energy deals with business partners, communists in China that go missing. Now the media says, oh, he's president-elect, and just shut up. You can't look at the irregularities. You can't look at the sworn affidavits. You can't look at the statements. You can't look at any of the real evidence of fraud, of dead people voting, of non-residents voting in Clark County, Nevada, of our poll watchers being blocked on tape. Yeah. All of those ballots counting in Pennsylvania, that's against the law. They didn't have Republican poll watchers present. And again, what do they have to hide? If it's so crazy and it's such a conspiracy theory, then why would they need to censor? Why would they need big tech coming in and censoring you, censoring me, censoring the president of the United States, which, mind you, they still haven't censored anything coming out of communist China. They haven't censored the Ayatollah. No, it's only the president of the United States that they censor. And keep in mind, what was the first, I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist again. What was the first thing that Twitter rolled out its censorship regime when it had never censored any world leader, to my knowledge, certainly not one of these hostile regimes, but they censored the president of the United States back in May. Why? Because he tweeted very valid, legitimate concerns about mail-in ballots, real stories. Like we saw in Paterson, New Jersey, a fraudulent election. They literally had to do a new election because of ballot harvesting and corruption in Paterson, New Jersey. And Twitter censored that back in May. And it's obvious what they were doing.
One of the most senior elections judges in the United Kingdom wrote an article for The Spectator magazine, one of the oldest magazines in the Western world, about how fraught mail-in ballots were with electoral fraud, with straight-up fraud, with in-your-face fraud, how it's so easy to defraud people out of their mail-in ballots. This isn't conjecture. This isn't you and I who, are not necessarily statistical analysts per mail-in ballots. These are judges who have dealt with these cases for decades, and Twitter's saying, no, you may not talk about that. This is not legitimate news. So my question to you, Liz, and to the RNC in general, is when are we going to start seeing some action being taken against these big tech corporates? And I don't mean Section 230. I mean marching the U.S. Marshals into the building and saying, hey, you are infringing on the First Amendment of the United States. You are taking people's rights away from them to discuss in what is very demonstrably, clearly a public square. right? The digital media is not any different from me going out on the street and speaking, and yet Jack Dorsey, he probably thinks he can also police the public square, as in me going outside to talk as well. Such is the psychosis of these big tech social media giants. Liz, we've got about 30 seconds left in this segment, so I'm going to bring you back in just a moment. Hang with us. Liz Harrington is the Republican National Committee spokeswoman. We're going to bring her back after just a short 2-minute break. I got a little too much on my soapbox there, but I'm sure Liz she's used to that, spending time at Morton's with me and the whole gang over the last 10 years. There have been many times Raheem has got on his soapbox, and it will be no different in about 22 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, over there on the Morton's Terrace. We'll be right back with more National Pulse, more Natalie Winters, more Liz Harrington. Our guest in this segment is the Republican National Committee spokeswoman, Liz Harrington. Elizabeth Harrington joins us. Now, Liz, I'm very sorry I Neil Cavuto'd you in the last segment, just totally talking over you. My question was, okay, what do we do about these big tech censors? Because this is becoming tyrannical.
It's really bad, and they're even censoring sworn affidavits, sworn statements, and saying this is disputed. Oh, by who? I guess big tech. I mean, it's unbelievable, and I don't know what the recourse is besides Section 230, and Congress needs to get involved. However, but I think Americans just have to make decisions as well and vote with their wallets and go to other platforms and take our agency back, take our freedom back. And this is so corrupt. It's so blatant. It's so in your face. And if people aren't willing to stand up now, there's really you're just going to have to let them take over everything. I mean, you won't have freedom of speech. They're rounding up lists. Did you get the memo? I'm sure we're both on it with Ocasio-Cortez and all of these.
I hope you and I are number 1 and 2, and you can pick the position. I hope I am right at the top of AOC's gulag list.
I mean, they tell you who they are. Let's just stop playing, beating around the bush here. And this is exactly who they are. And we can't stand idly by. But the good news is 4 years of big media lying about this president and smearing him as every pejorative under the book, in the book, under the sun. It didn't work. This president got the most votes from Hispanic Americans, from African Americans, from women of any party, of any sitting president. I mean, it's unbelievable how much he broke records because the truth wins, and the truth is going to win here. And again, like we said, there's a reason why they're censoring us. There's a reason why they're censoring these sworn affidavits and statements of ballots arriving at 4:30 in the morning, curiously all for Joe Biden, with no chain of custody, entering dates as, born as January 1st, 1900. I mean, this is so fraud. There's a reason why they're doing it. It's because it's true. And the truth will win here. We still are a nation of laws. We have the rule of law. We still have our Constitution. And we're pursuing all of these avenues legally. And I believe we will win. And again, we just got North Carolina. It should have been called a long time ago. But I think there's still outstanding states here that they haven't managed to take away from us yet. And we have a lot of evidence, a lot of avenues that we're pursuing, and we're going to win this thing.
I believe that you will win as well if everything shakes out fairly, Liz. But there's a rally taking place, I believe, in Washington D.C. this weekend. I don't know if you're abreast of that, if you're going to be there. I'll certainly be there and following along. That's Freedom Plaza, right, downtown D.C. on Saturday, I think.
Yes, I believe it's on Saturday. I just retweeted it out. We need people and patriots to rally all across this country because this isn't even about President Trump. It's certainly not about Joe Biden, the guy that didn't campaign, the guy that couldn't get 6 people in circles. And yet we're supposed to believe he shattered all turnout in just these select Democrat-held swing states, cities and swing states. But it's not about him. It's not about President Trump. It's about right and wrong. It's about rule of law. And it's about whether we have free and fair elections here. And every legal vote needs to be counted. And every illegal vote needs to be thrown out because that corrupts everybody's a system that corrupts disenfranchises any valid legal voter who stood in line, who went out in record numbers for this president. And that's what needs to be shown. Let's shine the light. If they have nothing to hide, why would they be blocking out our poll watchers? Why would they be counting ballots illegally? Why are there mountains of evidence and people coming from all sides of the aisle saying, this is wrong? I'm going to expose this corruption in Detroit, in Allegheny County, in Fulton County, in Clark County, Nevada. The last word will not be heard on this yet, but we know what the outcome is going to be.
Liz, got a couple more questions. Going to rip through them real quick if you don't mind. Is the RNC fit for purpose in this fight? Is it lawyered up? Does it have the staffing? Does it have the resources? Where can people help donate if they want to get involved with this?
Donate to the Trump Legal Defense Fund. It's a new fund. We also, RNC, launched a fund for John James. It's through WinRed. You can find their platforms right there. We did launch legal teams in all of these battleground states because we know we're going to have a recount, of course, in Georgia and Wisconsin. Detroit, we're really on the ground there with all of these affidavits. We have teams in Pennsylvania as well. So, yes, the Trump Legal Defense Fund is where all of that can go.
You know, I come from a country that has, unfortunately, a lot of voter fraud, given that Tony Blair introduced this mass mail-in ballots. Is there any doubt in your mind, A, that if they are allowed to get away with it this time, that it will happen every time and in much worse quantities? And B, what about the Senate races in Georgia? I mean, how desperately important are those now, given the ramifications?
Absolutely. They're very important. That's why we have a lot of staff going down there. But there's no doubt in my mind. Just look at what happened all throughout this year in these Democrat-run cities, right? If you appease the left, they will take everything that they can. And look at the destruction in Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis. And when these district attorneys and attorney generals didn't enforce the law, they keep breaking it. And that's why you had over 100 days of rioting in Portland. It's the same thing here. If you don't stand up, if you don't do what's right and have things that are fair and just, then they won't stop. You can't take a moral victory on a handful of, we flipped seats, and that's great. I mean, that's great news. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely. We worked really hard for this red wave, and we delivered that red wave. But if they can do this to the president of the United States, you don't think they'll do it and try to get away with it in every single race? No, it'll be just like these Democrat-run states where it's one party rule and they box you out of the system because they write the rules and they get rid of the Constitution. We can't let that happen. Okay,
let's finally, got about 30 seconds here left. I realize it's not a partying time right now, but I imagine by New Year's, it will be partying time, hopefully, if everything goes right and everything. And I've flown across the Atlantic for that buffalo chicken dip. So my last question for you is, if everything goes right, will you throw a party and will you make that buffalo chicken dip?
I think we'll all be throwing a party. I'll get you some, Raheem. I'll get you some. You've been desperate for this for so long.
It's so good.
Waiting patiently.
Liz Harrington, thank you so much for joining us here on the National Pulse today. The good news is, ladies and gentlemen, that my girlfriend actually makes a rather mean buffalo chicken dip now, but only because she got tired of me singing Liz Harrington's praises about the dip. Welcome back to the National Pulse. Natalie, we've just been told we have 3 seconds less in this segment, so let's get right to it. I don't want to lose 3 seconds here. Okay, you heard from Liz Harrington. She's convinced that I'm getting buffalo chicken dip, but also convinced that there was fraud going on. And I am too. I really am. Because I've done this for so very long that I know what this looked like en masse. You walked us through the Dominion system, how that works, how and why it was rejected by the state of Texas. We get bang, 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 all of those points. It's very clear for people to see. Your story's up on the National Pulse. But we've got another one coming, and I want you to walk us through it.
Yeah, so we just ran through all the reason why Dominion's voting systems really shouldn't be used, whether because it's difficult to use as a user or install. There's a host of reasons. So like the answer to many questions in Washington, D.C., the reason as to why they're still being used is ostensibly because of a very powerful team of lobbyists that they have. Now, when you look at the individuals who were retained for a sum of nearly $300,000, and the individuals that I'll say in a little bit, they are still currently retained by the firm. The hiring of these people started in January of 2019, and as I said, it's still ongoing. But one very interesting person who is essentially working for Dominion Voting Systems is someone who served on the Obama campaign in 2012. And according to the Washington Post, his role was, quote, a deputy director for voter protection for Obama for America, helping oversee the effort to recruit and organize attorneys to be poll watchers in the 2012 election.
But then that would be a totally non-partisan person.
Well, almost as nonpartisan as Nancy Pelosi's former chief of staff also being on this lobbying account at a huge legal firm. Again, for hundreds.
Wait, hold on. Jake Tapper has reliably tweeted, right? And I've seen the tweet that there's nothing to see here. That Dominion's fine, Pelosi's not involved, Obama's not involved. It's all some big conspiracy theory. You're telling me that Jake Tapper is wrong?
I think this goes back to something we were talking about probably about a month ago, and it is the effects of the Trump presidency in this campaign, in the sense that kind of the apparatus of U.S. elections now, whether that's the Presidential Debate Commission or even the voting systems themselves, they are inherently politicized, right? We were told by Steve Scully himself and everybody in the mainstream media that there was no bias coming from the selection of moderators. Yet it turns out that Steve Scully, as was proven and admitted to him, as he admitted himself, that he's a never-Trumper. He was an intern for Joe Biden. So I think that this
Hold on, and he lied.
Exactly.
He had to admit that he lied. This was going to be a moderator of the presidential debates. Okay, I'll come right back to Natalie. I want to look down the barrel of this camera and explain something to people out there. This isn't a game. We're not playing around. This isn't dog catcher. This is the most powerful position on planet Earth. As the presidency goes, the world goes. And you've got the Steve Scullys lying about their tweets to hide their shame and embarrassment for getting caught out for doing something nefarious, what they thought was behind the scenes, but it wasn't. It was in our faces. And they're lying about it, and then they're getting to potentially moderate the debate for the position of the most powerful man on earth, or woman, on earth. This is the future we're talking about. This is your kids and your grandkids' lives we're talking about. This is the future of energy security, foreign wars, markets, trade, everything. And Steve Scully is trying to hide that he was trying to DM Anthony Scaramucci. Scumbag of the scumbag. Right? Sue me, Anthony. You're a scumbag. You're a scumbag. And this is who Steve Scully was lying about talking to. I think we lose sight of this sometimes. And I like to think that in a sense, I can channel de Tocqueville, right? Which is coming to America and trying to remind Americans just how much this matters. This isn't about losing one election. You're not going to lose this election to keep your shoulders to the wheel. But this is about losing the world, right? Losing everything, tradition, history, institution, ideas. I mean, it baffles me sometimes when I see people being so flippant about it, right? Rolling their eyes, making silly TikTok videos, whatever they're doing. I mean, the Lincoln Project scumbags are doxing people, doxing lawyers right now on Twitter. Lincoln Project, another set of scumbags. You know, John Weaver fakes a cardiac event, pretends to check himself into hospital so that press won't ask him questions about a story that's going to come out from the New York Post about some allegations that some young men are making about him. I don't know the details. I just know what the New York Post had.
Well, to invoke someone from the past, not as great as de Tocqueville, but Barack Obama said in 2009
definitely not as great as de Tocqueville.
Elections
from the sublime to the less sublime. Go on.
That elections have consequences. Now, I think that our side should really kind of reappropriate that term. whether to be election fraud should have consequences, but really in the sense that elections and what we saw go on, whether it was Steve Scully, whether it's this voting system that conveniently flipped thousands of ballots to go to Biden instead of Trump, we need to act on it. I know the Republicans seem to always, raise an issue, whether it's big tech censorship, and then really do nothing for years. They fundraise off of it, but do nothing. But I really think what we saw go on in this election, right? These, ostensibly neutral actors, these bipartisan efforts, right? Or even the fact that it's the bipartisan policy group, which is taking the lead on Facebook's efforts to censor election-related content. We have a forthcoming story. They're not bipartisan. In fact, they gave Joe Biden an award in 2017. They have quotes from him on their homepage. This is the ostensibly neutral actor that's getting to censor our page, that's getting to censor the president, right? This is a false bipartisan group, yet Facebook allows them to get away with it. So I think that it's time that the Republican establishment, as Liz said, we finally need to act on this.
Great reporting, Natalie Winters, as ever. We'll have more tomorrow here at 3 p.m. tomorrow. I want you to stick around. David Brody and his water cooler are up next with an exclusive interview, I believe, with Kayleigh McEnany. That should be very, very good and important viewing. And David, I'm reliably informed, did not Neil Cavuto, Kayleigh McEnany, as both Neil Cavuto did yesterday and I did to Liz Harrington on this show this afternoon. I want to make sure that you're all going over to thenationalpulse.com. Look, I know so many of you are out there watching and you're thinking to yourselves, wow, it's great to watch a show that actually does the news. Well, help keep us on air. Go to thenationalpulse.com/support. It's cheap. Just sign up. We'll see you tomorrow.